Hi everyone, this is Detroit AllyCat. You know what day it is? Spooky Sunday today. Welcome back to my channel. I'm so happy to have you here. If you like my content, please think about subscribing, ringing the bell, leaving a comment. All those things help me out a lot. And, you know, I like to be helped out a lot. So without further ado, let's get spooky. Today we're actually talking about one of the most notorious haunted places in Michigan. It is called the Traverse City State Hospital. It's actually a really cool building, and when I was about 19 years old, my friends took me there in the middle of the night, and it's this big, overwhelming building, and like at a certain time of the night, the moon like shines over it, and it's beautiful. And the thing that's really cool about this hospital is it wasn't just a hospital, it was an asylum for a very, very long time. And it has like some mysterious background to it and some good background to it, but it's definitely a hot spot for ghosts. So let's get into it and let me tell you all about it. It was built in 1885 and it was known as the Northern Michigan Asylum. It would actually end up going by 3 different names because it would continue to change as the years went by because it was there for so long. So the first name was actually Northern Michigan Asylum, and then it became the Traverse City Regional Hospital, and at the very end it became the Northern Michigan State Hospital. Now, this hospital was run by David James Decker Munson, and he was actually a very interesting character. Most of the time when you hear about like in a haunted asylum, there's like some kind of like villain in the background and people are like, oh, he abused the patients. That's not the case in the beginning at this hospital. Dr. Munson actually believed in beauty as therapy, and I'm not talking like looking beautiful. I'm talking about he felt that if the patients were to have peace of mind, he felt that the area surrounding the building and the building itself, if it was very beautiful, it would be some form of therapy for these patients. So he really focused on the beautification of the land around it, inside. He really wanted to make everything happy. His motto is beauty is therapy, which I actually think that is really cool, especially for an asylum built like so far in the past, because normally you hear of like all kinds of horror stories and things like that, but that was not the case in this asylum. At one time, the asylum had 3,000 patients. There was 135 acres on this whole area, and it was almost like a little bit of a town. There was a greenhouse, which Dr. Munson took great pride in, and he actually had the patients go in there and help in the greenhouse, and that was a form of therapy in itself. And they would take the plants that were grown in the greenhouse and they would actually put them in the hospital for the patients to look at, so it made the hospital more beautiful and pleasant. There was a farm as well, and there were like cows and goats and all these different animals, and the doctor believed that the patient should actually help at the farm, so that was a form of therapy too, which I think that's actually great because, you know, animals are therapy, and that really made me happy when I read about that. From the beginning, you wouldn't think that this would be a place that would be haunted. And one thing that Dr. Munson was known for is that he was known that there was no straitjackets allowed in the building or on the premises. There was no form of torture done to these patients. So the patients were very happy there, and it was kind of like a tranquil like place to be at. and it was nice. By the 1930s, the hospital actually ended up being one of the city's largest employers. So not only was it a good hospital for patients to go to, it actually provided jobs for the city around, which that's great for the economy and the people in that area. Eventually, the polio, tuberculosis, and influenza pandemic started taking off, so they ended up using the hospital for that as well. Tuberculosis was a really big thing. They actually had hospitals dedicated just for tuberculosis, which is like, one day I'll talk about Eloise and hopefully get into that. That's like a whole nother huge story. But they ended up using this hospital for those patients as well. Now you have mentally ill, and you have some of these people that actually need physical mental care as well. So it became like a state hospital and an asylum at the same time. By the 1970s though, the building started losing funding from the state. Like many hospitals or many asylums, they just cut funding. The building was starting to get demolished, and this is where the dark side of the hospital actually starts to happen. The sad part about this is that like so many of the patients were really happy there, and they had considered this hospital to be their home. And when the hospital was shut down because it lost funding, these patients had nowhere to go. Now, when I told you that the hospital had 135 acres around it, it was a very large forest. It's like thickly dense forest area. And so with these patients having nowhere to go, they actually fled to the forest and decided that they were going to live there. But unfortunately, because Traverse City is kind of like upper north, the elements can be very, very harsh during the winter, and a lot of these people or patients fell victim to the elements and actually died. And that is why they say the grounds are actually haunted. They say that many of the patients were so very happy there that their souls felt at peace at the grounds. So when they passed away in the woods, they came back to the hospital and actually stayed there because they had no idea where they should go, and the way that they had died wasn't exactly peacefully. It was more they had been taken away from their homes and forced to go fend for their own, and many mentally ill patients cannot do that. These lost spirits came back to the hospital or the grounds, and that is where they have attached themselves to. Something that I really liked about this hospital is that they have underground tunnels, like really creepy underground tunnels. And they're like all underneath the hospital going to the different buildings and stuff. And there are supposedly a lot of ghosts that wander these underground hospitals. So let's talk about some of the hauntings that have happened. There is a famous legend in the area called the hippie tree. The hippie tree is supposed to be in the forest around the hospital. And I'm kind of like laughing because when I went to Traverse City, the thing that I like noticed immediately was so many of these college students were hugging trees. And that's cool. I love trees. And obviously trees love to be hugged, I guess. When I read about the hippie tree, I was like, oh, that's so cute. However, the hippie tree isn't like, I don't even know why they would call it the hippie tree. Just maybe because, you know, they do have so many college students that are tree huggers. But the hippie tree is supposed to be a portal to hell. And the thing is it's supposed to be somewhere in the grounds, and some people know how to get to it and some people don't. A lot of people go there and they try to find the portal to hell, the tree, the hippie tree. I just think that's a really strange name for the portal to hell. And something else that's kind of like that goes with this story is there is a lot of stories about satanic rituals being practiced in the woods, and they think that that's part of the reason that there's a portal to hell by the asylum. Sounds kind of like crazy, but you know, it could be true. There could be people that do satanic rituals in the woods because they've heard of the hippie tree and the portal to hell. I would love to see the portal to hell personally. That's just me. Also, there's a lot of reports of ghosts, and when the ghosts appear or are around you, you suddenly feel like the energy around you has changed, or there's like a change in the air. It's like harder to breathe, or you feel kind of cold. So there's a lot of reports of that. There is actually a story of a priest that lived in the grounds, which would be very common for a hospital or asylum to have a priest that lived on the grounds. And the thing is that this asylum actually had like, they were barracks, and they weren't in the hospital. They were like little houses in the back of the hospital, and like I said, it was like a town. And the priest had been like bothered by the evil spirits that were in the asylum, and he could feel them so much that he eventually hung himself in a tree in the forest. I'm not sure how, like, there was no name I could find. I don't know if this is like a urban legend or this is an actual thing. There's another story of a doctor that actually worked at the hospital, and the story goes is that he was very evil and he was very cruel to some of his patients, and he actually ended up killing them. And the story goes is that the patients became the lost souls that wandered the asylum in peril forevermore. And once again, I couldn't find a name of a doctor, but if it was a doctor that lived in like the 18 something or 19 something, it wouldn't be too uncommon to kind of like hide the name of the doctor. And it also wouldn't be too uncommon to have an angel of death working at such a large hospital. For those of you who don't know, an angel of death is a medical care worker that feels that their patients would be better off dead, and they take it upon themselves to show mercy to their patients and actually kill them. A lot of times though, these angels of mercy end up getting like some kind of an adrenaline rush by doing this, and it becomes a very sick addiction, and sometimes some of the patients should never have been killed. Actually, all the patients shouldn't have been killed, but you know what I'm saying, like some of the patients they obviously killed for that adrenaline rush to begin with. There was actually a crew of reporters that went out there to investigate and see if there was any truth to the story about these ghosts that lived at the asylum or the old hospital, and it was found that they actually said that they have proof of these ghosts because they recorded the voices in the background. And one of the hauntings that has been talked about a lot is that when people come to visit the hospital grounds, that they can hear voices in the background, talking, screaming, laughing. They can also hear people like running through the woods, and whenever they call out to find out who's running through the woods, no one would answer. These reporters actually have proof that they can hear these voices talking in the background, which I thought was pretty interesting and pretty cool. Now, the main hospital part itself had been renovated. It was turned into the village of Grand Traverse Commons. And what it is like this ginormous building. I guess it's kind of like, I wouldn't say a mall, but a building that different shops go into, and they have like festivals, and they have a winery and all these really cool little shops. I think that's really neat that they would take such a building and they would actually use it, because historically it's kind of amazing that that building stands. But while they were renovating the building for that to happen, a lot of the construction workers refused to work on the building, stating that when they were working on the building, that they could actually hear voices or feel the spirits, and they just didn't want to do it. It was hard to find construction workers that would work on it and renovate the building. That's the story of the Northern Michigan Asylum. I thought it was kind of a cool little story. The building itself is very intimidating. It's very beautiful. It still stands to this day, renovated with all these cool shops in it. I think that it would be definitely a place worth checking out. They now do tours and they talk about the different ghosts that go there and the different history that has happened there. If you're ever in the Traverse City area, which is actually a beautiful, beautiful area, and it's a great tourist attraction here in Michigan, you should go check out the hospital. And that brings me to the end of my story. I hope you enjoyed my cute little spooky story of the day. I hope you're having a wonderful Sunday. I hope this gets out by Sunday, but if not, I hope you're having a wonderful Monday. As always, everybody, stay safe and stay spooky.